Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to Down to Chat. Setting this up has been an absolute nightmare, but I do have with me, he's the only person who's ever talked himself into a speeding ticket. It's Adam Nather. Hello, Adam Nather.
I can guarantee you. Hi everyone. I've never not got a speeding ticket. Somehow.
Well, there you
Probably,
will talk yourself into one at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure I will. I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, back by demand. We've been asked. We had a comment from Blair asking us when the next episode is coming out.
I know people listened or watched or possibly both.
Yeah, I know. Thank you to everybody who did listen. It was really lovely listening to like all the feedback and just finding out people actually listened to this. I was quite surprised by the amount of people that did. So yeah, thank you to everybody.
Yeah, but I mean, you got much more than I did. So I mean, that says something. Obviously, they much prefer you, and you can take this on your own and go and do it all by yourself. So I'll just sit here in the corner dealing with audio gremlins whilst you talk.
I've not got an editor there. I can barely bring up Discord. If it was just me trying to edit this, it'd be a nightmare. But any feedback as well from anybody on any episodes is very much appreciated. So we can always make this better. We're still finding our feet, I think.
Yeah, this is very much a learning process, and without wanting to sound completely disingenuous as to the whole like, comment, and subscribe. If you could do those things, it is beneficial, and we do listen to what people have said. Well, we try to, and I do my best to read all the comments on the YouTubes and reply to them in some kind of timely fashion. But yeah, anyway, to prove that we listen to feedback, one of the first things that people wanted from last time was the fact that they had no idea what any context was to what we were saying in regards to championship stuff. So going into, we're still going to talk about what happened last time we were racing. That's the plan. But before we do so, we're going to give you a little nice lay of the land as to what had been happening. A preview, a prologue as to what was happening.
Yeah. Honestly, I think in my head I just didn't expect anybody who didn't race Club 100 to listen to the podcast. So I was just surprised that people needed a prelude. But yeah, it's definitely better to give one for anybody who hasn't gone into it. Do you want to start with your preview?
Yeah, well, I've got notes. I have notes this time because I'm taking this real serious. So, championship summary going into the last round, which was Wilton Mill. I haven't put any videos up about Wilton Mill yet because if I'm honest, I haven't even started editing them because life has been mental. For anyone that doesn't know, I'm a teacher and it's been SATs week, and that's just an absolute SATs term and then everything. So just anyway. So, going into Wilton Mill, you had Anwar leading. Can't remember by how much, but it wasn't by a lot. And Kurt and Joe were tied on points. The top three, very close. And I actually thought it was quite amusing that Joe and Kurt were like exactly the same through 2 rounds, which was brothers.
Yeah, I think they just mirrored each other from round 1 to round 2, basically. Whatever Kurt did in round 1, Joe did. No, whatever Joe did in round 1, Kurt did in round 2.
Yeah, pretty much. And then I think you brought this up last time, was that through those 2 rounds, 2/3, so like bang on 2/3 of the heats had been won by Kurt or Anwar or Joe.
Yeah,
of all the heats.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah, and then the top 10 in the championship were still within 80 points, which not too bad. Not too bad, considering that there's more people in each races now, so there's more opportunities to drop points. And the top 5 were within 50, which, I mean, 50 points at this point in the season, before you start looking at drop stores, you can make up reasonably quickly if people have bad days and stuff like that. And the most important statistic was that there were 7 points between me and you. There we go.
Yeah, with you being ahead.
Yes.
We'll add.
I
didn't have the best round 1. No, well, we'll see how it goes. I don't know. Looking at my heats, I don't know how. I think that I might stay that way, to be honest.
Yeah. So, did you have anything to add for the prelude as to what had been happening in Club 100 heavyweight sprints?
I would say the only thing I'd really add is the fact that there was a bit of controversy at round 2, between the top three, with a move being made on the line between Anwar and Kurt. So I think there were a little bit. You could say there was a bit of tension going into round three, between the top three, just because of how close the racing and how close the points total is.
Yeah, I think it's always the way, isn't it? Whenever anything starts getting very close, you start getting things can get prickly more quickly because the competition is higher.
Yeah, exactly, and they're just so close that the smallest things can make a huge difference. So that does lead to tensions rising slightly, which makes it more entertaining from a neutral perspective. To be fair,
like we hadn't had any heats together up until Wilton, and then the heats that we did have together, we still didn't see each other.
No, because we were like starting on opposite ends of the grid.
Yeah.
We'll have a race at some point where we've had each other in a heat and we're right next to each other, and you'll see the result of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what will happen? Guaranteed, we'll go to Rissington next time out, and we'll be on like the front row together, and one of us will have an absolute rocket ship, and the other one will have a dog, and then we'll still end up not seeing each other.
Somehow. Yeah. But last time at Rissington, to be fair, we did have a good heat together where we raced each other. I don't know if you remember, but we raced each other in your last heat.
I'd have to go. I'd have to go back and watch the video, which you can do too if you go to which hand's it? This one here. If you go to this link somewhere, just here, up here, probably. I think that's the side it comes on. You could go and watch that as well, and watch the heat in which Adam and I reportedly raced each other. I honestly can't remember. The only thing I remember from the only real thing I remember from Rissington with any kind of great accuracy is on the Saturday. On the last lap of like the SP, it would have been SP60. There was no SP40 last year. On the last lap of the SP60, I tried a little bit of an audacious move around the outside of Tim Williams and ended up like going along the grass, going around that sort of the last fast right before the left right finished the lap.
Right, yeah.
And it turns out the grass there is well bumpy. I probably spent more time in the air than I did on the ground. But yeah, it was all in good fun. So yeah, first heat we had together. I think yes. You were at the front of the grid, and that was my back start. I think
I started second, so that sounds about right.
Yeah.
And in the first heat, you get the 3 lap practice. I don't know how you used yours, but actually, I came out of the pits, and I noticed straight away that my kart steering column was slightly bent. It was a lot easier to turn into the left-handers than it was the right-handed corners, and I was going to pit, but I'd let a few karts through, and I realised that I had the pace on them in the 3 lap practice. And whenever you swap karts, you're in the kind of decision making of could get in something better, especially if what you currently have has some sort of issue. But you could equally get in something worse. And so, although I knew my kart wasn't the best handling, probably didn't have the best pace, by just judging against the other drivers who were starting around me, I knew I had the pace to still win. So I kept it. I don't know how your kart felt in those 3 laps, or if you picked up on anything.
I honestly can't remember the. I wouldn't. I tell you what. I wouldn't even be able to go back and watch the footage back because my camera parted company with the kart during those 3 lap practice. It wasn't the camera's fault. It was the mount's fault. So I've had to go and buy a load of new mounts. But yeah, the plastic GoPro mount that attaches to the kart just completely sheared off when I was coming out of. The left right of Ozier's, and was just like, see you later.
I was meant to get my GoPro and record footage so we could use it potentially in the podcast, and I left it in the mechanics bay all day in typical me fashion. So I don't have any footage of it, but
no, maybe next time.
Yeah, maybe next time when I finally remember that this will it could eventually be a feature.
Yeah.
Were you on the? Do you remember if you were on the odd or even side of the grid as well?
I think I was 13th in the first race.
Okay, so you might have benefited then, because I don't know at the race start as I was on anti-pole. Scott Parker, who was on pole, was really clever, and he rolled up the grid insanely slowly. And I slightly overcooked it, and I was on the brakes trying to slow down so I wouldn't get a jump start. And as soon as I was on the brakes trying to slow down, he went.
Yeah.
And so the even side of the grid got a dreadful start, and I think I dropped down to 5th. So yeah, I don't know if that benefited you at the race start. I thought I'd ask.
Yeah, from what I remember, the start of the race wasn't too bad. the kart that I had was fine. It was average in terms of like, it definitely wasn't a rocket ship, but it wasn't a dog. I had to say as well, like Wilton Mill is a circuit I think that really shows up performance difference, and in general the midfield seemed reasonably close, which would suggest that the parity is still reasonable. I think that there definitely were some rocket ships, and there definitely were some that people should have parked and had the boys in the workshop play with. Because I know that like you'd see a few. I had one in one race, and then I know other people had it as well, where it's just kind of like it needed to have been looked at. But on the whole,
Yeah, I mean, I parked one in practice, which ended up getting taken out. I do think that the two things that as drivers we could make better for the championship when it comes to kind of kart parity is not only do we kind of bring in the bad ones, but if we got something that we think this is probably a bit too good,
yeah,
like the rockets, that we should also try and make an effort to bring them in. Because if you, yeah, like the fairest way to do it is if you get a top cart or a bottom cart, you know, okay, let me bring it in, get it tested, and if the testers deem, okay, this is too good or too bad, then hopefully you end up with that kind of the average range. You want everybody really to have an average cart, and then you're all pretty much within a decent tolerance. So
yeah, but don't get me wrong. When you get a rocket ship, it's great.
That feels great.
But it's like you say, like if you know that people that you are comparable with, if it literally comes down to the fact that they've just got a better motor than you, it's kind of like, well, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so it was a fine car, and it got to the point where I'd gotten up to 6th by about halfway through the race. Like it wasn't a particularly quick progress, I don't think, that I was able to make through, but I was progressing forward. And
I think the gap opened up between carts pretty quickly as well. Like there was quite like I dropped down to 5th at the start, but then by lap 2. I was back and forth, but then looking back, like there was already a huge gap behind, so like to make progress through that heat would have been quite difficult. And then the top 4, as it was, including me, we then pretty much we weren't really fighting too much. I managed to make my way back up to the lead, but every single move that I'd made in those 3 laps it took to get to the lead, nobody had defended. It was just kind of like, okay, you're quicker, let's just move on. And once I got in the front, don't know if it was toe, don't know if the drivers behind maybe picked up a few things, but we all pretty much just stuck together for the rest of the heat. So, which again, when you're wanting to make your way through the back, you're hoping for a big scrappy race, and unfortunately, like everybody had their head screwed on. Scott Parker, C1, really good driver behind me. Like he, again, just has the race awareness to know that okay, I'm not gonna fight everybody and scrap and make this like a 6-car battle. Just keep behind, pushing, and then maybe on the last couple of laps where there's a big enough gap, that's when you try and make a move, and that's pretty much exactly what he did. And yeah, it just made the gaps pretty big, to be honest.
The gap would have gotten bigger as well because I didn't have the top end to make a pass easy going up into Christmas, and the bottom wasn't quite good enough to be great out the last corner, so I was kind of like stuck in that no man's land. Like the mid range was fine, like I say, it wasn't a bad kart, but that partnered with the fact that the guy in 4th got very defendy once, like probably about halfway through the race, maybe even slightly before halfway. I think they resigned themselves to the fact that they weren't going to catch 3rd, and so they just got very defendy. Wilton is a circuit where if someone's white lining it, like
it's quite difficult to overtake.
Yeah.
Despite there being a lot of overtaking zones, it's a bit weird. But if somebody's white lining it, maybe I guess it's just a thing of most circuits. So if you white line it, it's very difficult to make a move. But like I always think Wilton is a track where you can make a lot of overtakes. But I had it in another heat, which we'll go on to, where somebody was white lining it, and I really struggled to find a way past, to be honest.
Yeah, and on the last lap, I tried just a bit of a hero move around the outside of Christmas, because I've seen that work before, and it's not like it had been wet or anything, but there was
It's
just
not the most
there was
crazy
no
move.
grip,
People are able to make it work. No grip at all.
no grip, and the guy in fourth just didn't slow down as much as I thought he would. I thought
Yeah, okay.
I thought he'd like really try and park it on the apex, but he didn't. So no grip, plus the fact that I didn't really have much of a speed differential. I just had to tuck back in and couldn't get any further. But yeah, that was my race one.
You ended up fifth.
Sixth.
Oh, sixth, sorry. Sixth. And I was, I'd won that heat, so good start. But again, like, from your back start going up to sixth is pretty, I'd say is pretty good. You're not, like, to me, maybe if you rate a race out of 10, if I get from a back to sixth, I'd be like 7. Like, it's okay. It's good enough.
Yeah.
For you to still have a really good day, but it's not like mega. You're not in the top 5, top 4, maybe even getting a podium, but it's good enough. And then I'd say, like, well, there are some of the expectations when you got a front start, you want to win it. So for me, it was like, okay, I've won, great, but that's what you're expecting at that point.
Yeah.
And you've got your front start, you need to capitalise on it.
My second heat, I think, was the second heat that was the heat of doom, or my third heat that was the heat of doom. I can't remember. I think maybe it was the third heat.
I think it might have been your third heat because that had me and Warren Joe in it.
Yeah. So yeah, second heat. I think I started 10th and finished third. A reasonably comfortable race. Got a decent start. Managed to work through without too much difficulty, and then by the time I got into third, Joe and who was in second? Can't remember who finished second in that race, but the top two had just pulled out a massive gap because of pace differential from people defending in mid-pack compared to them just having nice clear track in front of them. So I think by the time I was coming out of Ashby, Joe was going like through Osiers. So and then the guy that was in second was sort of just coming out of Wilkins. So it's just like, okay, well, just don't do anything stupid now and finish third. Job done.
Yeah. Perfect. Like, yeah, mid start to third.
Yeah.
Pretty good, to be honest. Yeah, my race too, a bit more eventful. I started 10th, so middle start again. I thought it was going really well, kind of making my way through the pack, and I was about to get up into 4th, but there ended up being a slight incident. I'd made a move into the boot, really had got past, and then I think somebody had tried to follow me through, and then ended up hitting into the cart I'd overtaken, and they ended up sliding into me and taking me out. So I ended up all the way back at the back. Bit unfortunate, to be honest.
Yeah, with the wave of doom as well afterwards.
Well, yeah, I'd made a move into the boot, and I thought I was completely fully passed, so I just assumed the move was done. I actually spoke to the marshal because there wasn't a penalty given, and I spoke to him after, and they were just as confused as me, as in the spotter at the boot.
Yeah.
It was Rob, and I just spoke to Rob after, and he was like, "Oh, what happened to you?" Because he was like, he'd seen my overtaking to the boot, seen me get past, and just looked away because he thought it was done.
So
the next time he looked,
yeah.
Yeah, and then the next time he looked, he was spun around, and I was so confused as to how that's happened. I've never been spun around there before. I'm still confused as to, like, I can see what happened, but you don't typically, even if you get a bump from behind, it doesn't usually send you around, and it just sent me straight round. I had no control.
And I think actually that's a really quick tangent. I think that's a good point to make when some people feel like they've been majorly aggrieved in a heat because something hasn't been called against them. It's remembering that there's only, I suppose, unless it's a real hotbed of activity, there's only going to be one spotter on each corner. And so in that situation, like you're saying, Rob's seen you make the move, it all looks hunky-dory and everything's sort of sorted itself out. And so he's moved on to look at the next group coming through.
Yeah, not realising something else might happen. Because like I said, I've never seen anybody get spun around there until it happened to me. It's not typically, most people don't typically go for a move on that corner unless it's a really late lunge. And again, even if there's contact, it's usually side to side. It's not usually on the back of somebody. And this is just the case where I just literally hit the back of my cart and spun me around. Which is a shame because I honestly thought that was a move for 4th place, and that was only on like 3 or 4. So I thought P2 was pretty comfortable. Kurt Holmes had kind of left us, but as it was his front start. But I really thought that P2 was pretty pretty set. Like I was in my head, I thought this would be pretty comfortable getting up into second, and then I ended up ninth, which is another heat that will hopefully end up being a drop by the end of the year. But I keep picking up these heats that I want to drop.
Yeah.
My heat results aren't going great at the moment, in all honesty, which is the complete opposite to what it was last year. I had great.
Welcome to my last year. Yeah.
Yeah, we might swap roles this year. You never know. This could end up being the outlook of the season.
There you go. And then third heat was the Heat of Doom. That was my front start. Luckily, in the Heat of Doom,
that was my back start.
And I was starting behind Anwar, who's on pole. We both got a decent start, although I had to go a little bit tighter through Crook, the turn 2 right-hander, which meant that I ended up dropping a bit and had to defend a bit going into Christmas, and then that sort of gave a bit of a gap. And then through the race, I was picking up about half a tenth to a tenth sometimes on him if he made a mistake, but he doesn't really make mistakes. So I think like one lap I gained a tenth, and then I was gaining half a tenth on every other lap, which was frustrating because if I hadn't had dropped as much off the start, I'd have been in like a decent position come the end. But it didn't really matter because he got a track limits penalty for going wide pretty much every lap at turn 2. So I inherited the win anyway.
Did you notice him going wide at turn 2? Did you notice it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Every single lap. Yeah.
I will say that weekend that it was very clear in the briefing that you can't go 4 wheels off the track at turn 2. Mm-hmm. However, I personally didn't do it because I didn't want to risk the penalty. But I had seen many people do it consistently and not seen warnings on the digiflag.
Now, I've got a confession. I've got a confession to make, right? Because I feel like it's less of a confession and more of a disclosure of gamesmanship. But having been told that you're not allowed to go all 4 wheels off, first couple of laps, go through, Anwar goes wide, come back round. Nothing on the digiflag, right? So I was like, okay. Next time it goes round, goes wide, and I can see the spotter. And I think it was Harrison that was on that corner. I wouldn't quote him on that, but I think it was. And goes wide, and I don't see any microphone radio happening. So I'm just like. Well, no, not with 2 hands. 1 hand. I was like,
so you signal to the marshal, like?
Yeah, I was like, are we going to talk about this or not? And then I see radio, and I'm like, yes, good. and then we come around the next lap, and Anwar goes wide again. I mean, that's twice. That's twice now. Technically, it's more, but that's twice now. And then did it a few more times, and he ends up getting I think. He got a penalty going onto the last lap, so obviously it says it didn't come on the board because it says final lap, and that overrides everything else. But ended up inheriting the win through a penalty for Anwar, and that penalty for Anwar actually was beneficial for Joe as well.
Yeah.
In that he needed to finish in front of Anwar, so I'm just being delivered olives.
That was a great magic trick of getting a drink in your hand.
Because that's how middle class I am. I eat olives whilst podcasting.
It's olives. I thought it was a drink.
No, olives. I've got. Oh no, there is a drink. There is a drink as well. Fantastic.
Oh, there you go. There's a drink.
There we go. Drink and olives. Get me. See, this is what you need. You really need to up your podcasting game. No drinks or olives.
I think if I asked my housemate to get me some olives and a drink, I think he would. Enact some violence onto me for daring to make such a request.
Yes, fan me as well. Yeah, but yeah, that was actually important for Joe as well because it was basically a straight shot between him and Anwar who was going to get pole because they'd both had the same results. Kurt had a further down finish, so I think he was out of the pole conversation. And yeah, because Anwar got dropped back to third, it promoted Joe to second.
Anwar started third though, didn't he?
What's that?
In the A final, didn't Anwar start third? I've got a feeling that it wasn't.
Yeah, because I started fourth. Yeah.
I think Kurt and Joe ended up tied on points. I'm gonna quickly check the grid. Yeah, so they ended up tied on points. It went down to lap time.
Okay.
But yeah, I was. It's interesting to hear about that turns 1 and 2 thing because I'll be honest, yeah, anybody I saw going full wide all day did not get a warning for it. When I was, and I stuck with it because I was like, well, I know what the rule is. I don't want to risk it +2, but it's actually good to know that okay, that it was getting marshalled points in the day.
Yeah.
I think it makes a difference because as it stands, I don't do turns 1 and 2 flat. If having to have 2 wheels on the runoff, I don't like completely lift off the throttle, but there's a slight little. Well, actually, in all honesty, I don't lift the throttle off. I dab the brake, so I double pedal it slightly, to make sure I don't run over track limits.
Yeah, I don't think...
I think if you have 4 wheels over, you can do it flat.
Yeah, I don't think you actually want to do in the Club 100 kart. I don't think you actually want to do turns 1 and 2 flat. I think you get a better exit out of 2 and a better run up the hill.
This was a debate.
If you have slight, like not a big lift, it's not like a proper off the throttle. It's just bleeding off it slightly. But
almost like a confidence lift.
Yeah, because I was speaking to Joe about this, and he was saying that's what he does. We weren't having a conversation about what do you do at turn 2. It was more of a conversation of like trying to set moves up going up the hill. And in doing that, he was saying, well, like one of the things that I do that a lot of people aren't. It's like I always have that little lift going into turn 2.
Well, Kurt does the exact same.
Yeah,
I had the exact same conversation. Yeah. But here's an interesting thing. So the heavyweight champion Joe lifts off in turn 2. The lightweight champion Andrew McWilliam doesn't lift. He does it completely flat. We had this debate.
But they're wee, aren't they?
What did you say? Sorry.
They're wee. They're light.
Yeah, but if anything, they should have less grip. They should have less traction. So if anything, you'd assume that the heavyweights would actually be the ones able to do it flat. But I spoke to Andrew. He does a little lift. I spoke to Fraser Brunton, previous C1 champion. He does a lift. So Andrew's the only one I know who does it completely flat from the top C1s, in both categories. But it was interesting to see that both like from top drivers. Both people do different things. I feel like I'm in the middle where I don't lift off the throttle, but I dab the brake while I'm on the throttle. So I just don't like lifting in these karts. I just can't. I don't know. I'm not very good at it. So anytime I need to lift, I just double pedal it. So that's how I drive. Not as quick, but my way of doing it. But yeah, I guess going on to I was in the same heat as Tim, but again I had my back start. I think I was 13th or 14th. Similar story to my first 2 heats in the sense that like the first lap, the start, I just did not have a great start. I lost a couple of positions. Definitely race starts I seem to struggle with. At least I struggled with at Wilton. Just consistently throughout the day. And then I managed to make moves. I managed to catch up to the back of Joe. But then we got up to the back of Sam Pike. And Marcel Chmielewski, both pretty quick C2s. Marcel, I think, currently leading the C2 championship. And Joe was able to get past them, and I wasn't for ages. I got past Marcel, and then got to the back of Sam, who was white lining it, and I made a move into Christmas, overshot it. He got me back, and then Marcel got me back, and I just couldn't get back past them both. So I ended up 6th, same as your back start. I just ended up P6. I just couldn't. Weren't the kart or anything. I just couldn't make a good enough move. And yeah, I probably should have, like, in hindsight, been a bit more aggressive and probably potentially got P4. And with the move on Pike, I wasn't very confident making moves into Christmas all day. I should have probably made it at Ashby, which is where I think I was making moves stick more often. I just seen a small opening and I tried to take it. But yeah, I probably should have been more patient with that. And yeah, P6. So again, happy or content with P6. Not the best heat in the world but it is your back start, and to get to P6 isn't too bad, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, then that obviously leads on to A final. Both of us made it through to A final the first time of asking, which is good. Matt, that was something I wanted to make sure I did last year, was avoid B finals at the Plague, which I did, and that's my goal for this year as well. Stay out of B finals. Yeah, the third and the first really helped in terms of that put me 4th on the A finals grid. Okay, kart, not worth changing.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe.
Were you behind any of the top drivers when you came out the pits?
No, which didn't help.
Okay. Yeah, I always try and get behind one of them if I can. I was lucky enough I was behind Kurt.
Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I started a bit further back. I was ninth. Just thought I'd yeah. I think the spin kind of cost me. I think I'd have been starting around near you. Otherwise, but I thought I had a pretty good cut. I was quicker than Kurt in the practice. But yeah, just being able to compare to a top driver is pretty useful. Yeah, going on to the race start. How did your start go?
It wasn't bad, but I lost out just through momentum to Alex, and then that's always going to dictate a tough progression from that point because he's not easy to pass at all.
No, great driver.
So,
but he's very difficult to pass, which again is a testament to how good of a driver he is.
Yeah, and especially like where like you're at Wilton, you go, well, where's the main place you want to take? Well, the main place you want to overtake is at the top of the hill, and he's so late on the brakes going into turns.
I know.
Like whether or not that's the best way to take the corner is up for debate in terms of what it gives you on the exit, but it just makes trying to overtake into it so bloody hard. Because you just can't do it because the only way you'd be able to do it is to be even later, and then you're not making the corner.
Pretty much.
So yeah, there was one moment that I think dictated how my race was going to end up finishing, because you had really good pace through the race, but you'd kind of drop back off the start. And Kurt,
I was on the grass.
Yeah,
I was on the grass. I went down to like 10th.
Fair.
Oh, 12th, sorry, something like that. I had a really bad start.
But yeah, like Kurt and Alex had like a bit of a ding dong in like the first third of the race, and I wasn't able to follow Kurt through. And in that sort of melee and slowing down that happened from them, that then allowed you to catch up quicker than maybe you would have done if we were behaving ourselves. Well, I say we, that I wasn't really part of it. I was looking to try and pick up pieces. But if they'd been behaving themselves more, maybe it would have taken you a bit longer to catch up. I still think you would have caught up, but it would have taken longer. And then by that point, I might have had a chance to have gotten past as well, and that would have saved me. But yeah, there were just a couple of moments that if I'd have been able to get through on Alex and make it stick, I think I had the pace over him over the course of a lap, even though he was obviously very difficult to pass going into certain corners because he was braking so late. But didn't, and the one opportunity I did almost have, I can't remember who it was. I think either Kurt went for a move on Anwar, or Anwar went for a move on Kurt, and then that sort of slowed everyone going down into Ashby, and I tried to get up the inside, realised I wasn't going to be able to get round the outside of Kurt, so I went to drop back in behind him before the left-hander of Wilkins, and because I had to try and get off to get in behind Kurt, and Alex didn't, by the time I was trying to slot back in, he just had enough of his nose alongside me that I could be like, I can't just go in, but I have to give him the space. And then that gave him the inside for the left-hander. And if anyone knows Wilson Mill, trying to hold around the outside of that left-hander isn't going to end well. And so it's just a case of, okay, fine, yeah, you've got it, fine.
And yeah, like, so from my perspective, I had a pretty bad start, ended up on the grass. But I had a decent kart, and I felt quick all day, to be honest. Like, after the testing, I struggled a bit, but then as soon as Heat 1 came, I felt pretty quick, so I felt really comfortable in that kart. Got my way back up. After their fighting with Kurt, I was able to kind of catch up to Tim and got past him, and then I had pretty much the same issue as Tim did. Alex is so late on the brakes, also a great defender, and also was like very quick, so the pace differential wasn't massive. I made a move into Christmas, not realizing how late he braked, and just like there was contact, and he managed to hold on exit anyway. But I kind of went in thinking, oh, I'll just wait till he brakes, and I'll just then brake so I can get him overlap. And he just didn't, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm braking really late here. I'm not used to braking late here, and I think as a driver, like in terms of my own driving style as well, like I'm never last a late breakers. I think even where most people typically brake, I'm probably one to brake a bit earlier, but I just prioritize exits, which to be honest is a slight detriment to me. I think in a lot of main braking zones, I could brake slightly later, not massively, but maybe half kart length. So then trying to brake as late as Alex does, which is probably add another kart length or two on top, was just didn't go well. And he then pointed forward, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna try and stick with him. I probably should have sent more moves, but I think the Christmas one spooked me. Had I sent more moves, I think I could have then caught up to Kurt and then been in the fight for the lead. To be honest, I think the Kurt had the pace. I had the pace. I should have just been a bit more brutal and maybe raced Alex a bit more. I didn't. I stuck with him, and I just didn't feel the confidence to make another move until the last 2 minutes, where I thought, okay, I really need to get a move on now. Made a move into Ashby, which is where I felt more confident making a move all day. The first lap I tried it, he'd got past on the exit. The second lap, I tried to cover that off, and luckily just didn't get the run out the corner, and I managed to get past him. But by the time I'd got past Kurt and Anwar were just too far forward, which is kind of frustrating because on the last lap they had a right ding dong battle, and I was catching really quickly, and had there been another lap, I think I would have been on the back of them by the last half of the lap and maybe been able to pick up the pieces. But yeah, lesson learned from that was just maybe try and race a bit earlier if you know you've got the pace, even if it's somebody that is really late on the brakes, that you're just going to halt your progress otherwise. But fair play to Alex, because I don't think he had the kart under him. Like he was still very quick, but I think he showed a lot more pace all day. So with a bit of a better car, he would have been right up in the lead battle. So to still be able to defend from both of us for ages, like he did, without losing anybody too much time, was really impressive. So yeah, just props to him. Yeah, I think that was pretty much it. I ended up P4 in the end, and you just behind in P6.
Yeah. Yeah, then the only thing I'll probably add is like you're saying, you were making a lot of moves going into Ashby, and I think that is where you got me, and I did not expect it at all, because I'd sort of clocked. I didn't realise maybe how much time we'd lost going through Christmas and Inkermans compared to the run that you had on that lap, where you just had so much of a better run coming out of Christmas and then Inkermans, to the point where I didn't realise how much ground you'd made up and just wasn't in a position to try and put you off making the move. And it was just kind of like you were just suddenly there, and I was like, well, cock.
Jacob, I don't know if you saw the live stream, but Jacob made a comment of the podcast when I made the move on you.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. Saw that.
I thought it was quite funny as well.
Yeah. He was right. I'm holding it against you still. It wasn't that. I think finishing sixth is still that's the sort of thing where, as long as I can sort of finish around that position at worst throughout the course of the year, that's a good place to be. Like, obviously you want to be finishing higher up, but as long as you're not getting like, oh, I finished a sixth here, a fourth here, a fifth here, but then I was finishing like 12th and 15th and everything else for the rest of the year. It's like,
yeah. I mean, I was very happy with fourth, but there was a tinge of disappointment because I knew in that race I had the kart and I had the pace to challenge further up, and I know it was kind of in my fate whether I could have challenged further up, and I just didn't take that chance.
A bit like I was saying last time, is that one of the goals for me is to like finish where the kart deserves to finish. So
exactly, and I think that kart should have been in the top 3. But yeah, that is a great way of putting it. Like, if you've got a good kart, you know you need to make the most of it. Whereas if let's say I had a very average kart and I was in fourth, I would have been like, oh, that's great, what a race. It's just that mindset changes when you know you've got something that is capable of a win or capable of a top 3. But to say that you come out of a race disappointed, maybe slightly disappointed with a fourth or a sixth, it's probably quite a good sign of our progress, I'd say. Yeah. I had that thought on the way back where I was like, oh, okay, I'm a bit disappointed, but I finished P4, which, you know, is one of my best finishes pretty much since I've done the sprint. So, yeah, like that I think shows a good sign of progress.
And I think that last thing before we move on to the next thing is I've sort of made a note here to talk about sort of my final takeaways, or our final takeaways from Whittle Mill. So the epilogue. We've done the prologue of the epilogue. So what have I said? I've said the last chicane still feels no better than the first time we read it towards the end of last year, and I still agree with myself there. It doesn't feel any better. I actually think the way that they're making us run it, where the cones are, you don't want to be touching that launcher curve at all. It's slower, I think.
I disagree. Funnily enough, I think the curve's quicker. I love that curve. I love the little bit of curve they give you. I love taking it.
Maybe
think it really helps.
that's a driving style difference. Then I was finding that unless I was able, if some on the Saturday in one of the SP60 races, it wasn't there for like the first half of a race because obviously it got knocked out the way at the end of the lightweight race and just wasn't put back. And launching that curb definitely quicker for me. But I was finding that for the on the sprints day, like if I was clipping it, it was unsettling me too much to the point where I couldn't get the drive out. So sacrificing that left-hander more to turn in a bit later, keep it further left, and then be able to then get on the throttle earlier to drive around the right-hander, that was better for me. So
fair enough. I don't know why I found that. I think the reason I found it quicker just hitting the curb was it just felt like it kept the revs up, and I don't think I was going in any hotter. Obviously, it kind of, you might argue it unsettles you because you do go over a curve, and not enough where you're gaining distance.
yeah. I mean, were you putting the anchors on going into the left?
Not massively. I don't brake much through that corner at all.
No, because I was finding that all I was really doing was I was basically just lifting, maybe a little bit earlier than I would have done if I was braking, but I was finding that lifting and sort of coasting, picking up the throttle kind of just before the apex to get the revs back up again, that was quicker for me.
That's fair. I'm not comfortable lifting in these cars. Like I said previously, I don't. Most corners where people just say, "Oh, you just need to lift," I don't. I just can't do it. I don't know what it is. I feel like I just don't feel like the cart front end just listens as well. Like, it just doesn't feel like it. Like you just don't get the grip.
Your parking cart. I was gonna say, your parking carts at the end of race has been like, can you just swap the brake out for another throttle?
Yeah, I'm probably burning clutches as well by double pedaling, but that's one for the mechanics.
Yeah. But, the only time I tend to double pedal is in the wet.
I do it. I don't do it that often. I used to do it a lot more often, and I think me doing it less has actually helped my pace slightly. But in very fast corners where it's just not right getting it flat, and most people lift, I will then double pedal. I don't do it anywhere else really. I know some people do it for a lot of corners, but now I used to as well. But now it's just literally very, very fast corners where you just want to have a bit of a lift, but I'm not good enough to just lift. So that's my kind of approach, I guess.
Talking about lifting, I said the extra power in the carts was noticeable and beneficial. It made some of the corners a bit more of a challenge. Yeah.
I didn't notice it for at Wilton. I've not noticed it since Buckmore, genuinely. No? I haven't felt it at all.
No, I thought that Wilkins was more of a challenge. Like last year, the left-hander after the Ashby hairpin was flat. This year, you had to modulate it a bit more.
Last year?
Yeah.
I could not do it flat last year. So that might explain it. I did it pretty much the exact same where, again, similar to turns 1 and 2, I double pedal it. I keep, okay, so my foot is technically flat on the throttle, but I definitely dab the brake. But I have tried it flat once in an endurance race a couple of years back, and I ended up in the tyres. Since then, I've decided that keeping it flat is not for me.
You had to hit your marks. Like, if you didn't, you would have to do like a little bit of a feather, but like, if you got yourself into a rhythm, yeah, last year it was flat.
Yeah, well, that's somewhere I was probably losing time last year because I definitely did not do it flat. Yeah. I actually think I was carrying more speed this year than I was last year into it, as I was tapping my brake less than I used to. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I thought that Ozier's was more challenging as well. Like I had to change the way that I was driving Ozier's, but that could be a combination of tyres and more power.
I thought that was a tyres thing because I think in some karts where I had better tyres that I was able to do it without any oversteer. Whereas in karts where like it just had less grip, I was tending to have it to feather the throttle slightly. Also at Christmas actually, like getting back on the power in the practice, I'd have my rear end just step out massively because we had new fronts on but old rears, and so when I had a kart with less grip, I'd just feather the throttle. Not a long time, but just gradually get to full power, and that really helped through both Osiers and Christmas. But I didn't think that was a result of the extra power, which it could have been actually. I just never considered it.
Yeah, and I was also talking about Christmas. I thought that it was noticeable there that you would have a tendency to sort of go wider on the exit and make Inkerman's a bit more of a corner if you tried to take the piss a little bit too much going through Christmas, whereas last year it wasn't a hard corner, and then the left-hander afterwards wasn't a hard corner. Whereas this time there were multiple times where I went a little bit too wide on the exit, which then made the left hand, your unofficial boxing day, like that made that more of a corner, which then sort of pushed you out more towards the outside, and then you're risking dropping a wheel. Like it was just there was more room for there was less room for error than there was last year. There, I thought.
I can actually agree with that, but I hadn't self-reflected. I hadn't made the link that that could be due to the less restriction, because I guess the thing that characterised it for me at Buckmore was just coming out of corners, just that extra feeling of oomph. Whereas I haven't, I guess maybe because I'm used to it, I didn't get that at Wilton. But all the points you've made about Christmas, if you overshot it, there seemed a bit more margin for error. Same when you went for Inkermans, like if you kind of messed up the line, you were kind of floating towards the edge of the circuit. I noticed, but I just wasn't able to make the link. So maybe you are right. Maybe that is actually just a result of the smaller restrictor the lack of a restriction on the carts, which is a good thing. But I think the more skill that it takes to drive the carts, the bigger that driver skill comes into it, and so the bigger gaps you can build. The more of a puzzle it ends up being in order to extract the most pace from a kart, which is to me the best part about racing in a series like this.
Well, there you go. There's our experience of Wilton Mill recapped. Now, going back to comments that people have had, is that because we're fat and heavy, we don't have as much we don't have as much of a leaning towards talking about lightweight stuff, which is fair. We don't. Especially as they're always in the afternoon and I'm on my way home at that point.
Yeah, so, I actually watched the first two lightweights. I was there for them, but this is the one round that I wasn't there, which I'm kind of gutted about.
Yeah, well, I do on the televised rounds, streamed rounds. I do try to have the iPad and
live
stream on whilst we're driving back, because the old man tends to do the first stint after a race weekend.
Okay.
But or I'll follow along on live timing if it's not going to make me feel too sick, because I can't look at my phone like whilst I'm in the car. It makes me feel awful. But yeah, so I had the stream on, and I tell you what, that A final was something, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was crazy. I cannot believe that. That's why I wanted to be there. I was like, how did I miss such an A final? That was mental. And can I just say, in episode 1, I predicted this. I said that Wilton, every driver thinks they're a bit quicker there because we go there a lot.
Yeah.
Juniors have already made a bit of a, I've been a bit aggressive. And so it could lead to some tears at Wilton Mill, and I think it did exactly that in that lightweight A final. Less so in the heavies. The heavies were pretty well behaved. Apart from maybe one incident in the A final, which people apparently was a bit controversial, but no penalties adjudicated. But the lightweights, that was crazy.
So you've had the benefit of actually talking to people and being social. I haven't. So here we go. So first thing, and not to get it out the way, but I think like there's other stuff that is going to end up taking more precedence in terms of talking. So fair play Dante, because that was a hell of a drive to be. So he was down to 18th, I think, at one point I counted. Could have been worse.
After that one.
And he was still 10th with 2.5 minutes to go.
Yeah.
I
still don't know how he won that.
So to come back and be second on the road and inherit the win because of penalties and stuff, and not say that an inherited win is worth less, because you still got to drive the race without getting a penalty. But to get back to second on the road, having been 18th and only having 2.5 minutes to go from 10th to second, fair play. That's a great drive.
Amazing from Dante. And one thing I'll also congratulate him on was his celebration over the line was amazing on the stream. You see people too nonchalant with celebrating an A final win nowadays. That was a proper celebration, and well deserved one for, so far I'd say driver of the season in an A final.
I mean, I don't know if you've I don't know if you've spoken to him at all, like after it, but like whether or not he knew that Fraser had a penalty, if he'd seen it, or if he was just celebrating coming second. Because either way, like
haven't asked that, but I've got a feeling he knows. Dante and Fraser are good friends.
Yeah.
I think he'll know Fraser's race number. It isn't
Yeah.
like a needed one because he didn't do the sprints last year. But I've got a feeling he knew. I have spoken to him, but I haven't actually asked that. And I did wonder it myself, but I think he knew, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
And it was his first A final win since 2021, maybe?
I was
Or
gonna say,
20, no, 20, that's not right. 2023, maybe.
No, yeah, 2023 because he didn't win one last year.
Yeah, he didn't win one last year.
He was just super consistent, which was then put him in the fight. But yeah,
Okay, Rosberg almost won the championship without winning a race.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I like I said, his celebration was crazy. So I think he must.
Fair play, Dante. That was a hell of a drive. Now we move on to the bits that's going to take way more talking time. So, my next one was all aboard the Brunton Express, because that was a display of defensive driving that I don't think we've seen for a long time. In terms of, like, you see defending, but like to be defending for under so much pressure at the start of the race, and then to be caught, then to get a bit of a gap, so it's like, yeah, cool, everything's sort of set down, and then to be caught up again and have to do it again towards the end, like, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was
like,
a really good defensive drive.
Yeah, and I mean,
think he did really well.
I think like the entire field or something was like within 10 seconds as they came over the line. It's like, that's mental.
I think there must have been 10 seconds between like us in P4, 5, and 6, and then everybody else in the rest of the field in our A final. Like, it would have been quite a big gap.
Yeah.
So yeah, to have that entire grid by 10 seconds is mental. And just showcases how much of a defensive drive he had on display. And like, to do it from that one, it's a long, compared to your heats, which are like 7 minutes, long final being 12, it's not easy to do. It's not something you typically have to do. So I think all things considered, he did really well. I'm assuming he just thought he didn't have the cart behind him and just realised pretty quickly and thought.
Yeah, I mean, what I remember when I was watching it, you saw that first lap go by, and it was just like, he doesn't have the cart. Like, he doesn't feel like he's got it. And I think like Wilton as well, because of the type of circuit it is, like, it can be really risky defending that hard for that long, because not necessarily the person behind you is going to do anything rash and stupid, but if you've then got a cart, like a train of 15 carts, one of them will get something wrong, and then that's going to cause such a concertina, or not concertina, the concertina's from the front, but it's going to cause a reaction down it, to then you're going into a corner being loaded up by like 14 people. It can go very wrong very quickly, which it did for one driver in particular. So I think just as much as Dante's drive was awesome, it was also really good to see like Fraser's defense as well. It was impressive. Speaking of that defense and then it going wrong for someone, now I've watched through, and I probably in the video version of this, I'll have something looping whilst we're talking over this. I've watched through the sequence of events that basically had, who was it? It was Sam Lovelace, wasn't it, that was chasing down? So Sam
Fraser
going up the inside of Fraser at turn 1, which then got them both a bit out of shape through turn 2 and allowed Andrew McWilliam up the inside going up the hill. So
all drivers competing for the championship, by the way. So everybody who is going for that C1 title by the end of the season.
So like that, all kosher. Like it was close racing, and it came out pretty much as you'd expect it to through those few corners and through the bays they were spaced. Then Fraser sort of goes, okay, well, I don't really want to be the guy in the middle here, so he's kind of like tucked in back in behind Andrew, and there's then gone for the move going into Christmas. Now, that's the move that ends up giving Fraser the penalty at the end of the race, which allows Dante to inherit the win off of him, because he still crossed the line first. I've watched it through a lot.
Yeah, so have I.
And the only conclusion, and I've got the benefit of slow motion. I'm not the person that's watching it in the moment. I kind of felt like it was Andrew doing it to himself. Like not in a kind of like intentionally, but I kind of feel like Fraser was there, and he was going to make the corner. And if you, again, slow motion is a wonderful thing. If you watch the slow motion of the actual entry into Christmas, Fraser is, I would say, enough alongside that Andrew would know he's there, and he's still got his wheel straight, approaching the corner, and Andrew starts turning.
So, I would say, I think Andrew's usually pretty clean. He did not want to turn in, and I think I kind of agree with you that I think Andrew should have seen Fraser. But what I think has happened is Andrew is aware that Sam's on the outside, and to be honest, Sam, who gave all the space in the world, got shafted the most from this incident, which I feel really sorry for because
I don't know. You can say that because I'm pretty sure Andrew went from like leading the race.
Oh yeah,
to
Andrew
24th.
also went to 18. Yeah, that is true actually. Yeah. Okay, they both got shafted, but Sam, who like, you could argue who's in the wrong between Fraser and Andrew. There's no fault on Sam there. He just tried out around the outside and he gave the space and he ended up off. And yeah, I don't know. He looked so aggressive for that race, like making really cool moves, like an attempt on Fraser. I was willing him to win that race. So I'm sad it didn't end well for him. But I think what I was getting at is I think Andrew was so focused on Sam on his outside that in that moment he just didn't clock on Fraser was there. I think Fraser was alongside enough that he should have seen him. I think in that scenario you shouldn't turn in as much as you did, and that's what caused most of the contact. Having said that, I think Fraser's move was really, really late, and so I don't know whether I still don't know whether I give a penalty or not. I'm really torn. Like, to me, it's on how late Fraser broke, because he looked completely behind them already at the braking zone. So then to pull out after, like, he must have got. I think the move was made really, really late. But having said that, I guess he made it. He did make it to the apex, and I don't know if he made it to the apex because of the contact, or if he made it to the apex because he actually managed to get it stopped in time. And I don't think I can't tell from the live stream footage. I'd have to see somebody's footage.
Again, I tried to watch it as much in slow motion as I did at live speed as well, and like, yeah, he's going to be super tight, but I think he would have made the corner. It's difficult because obviously it's the way the camera's looking at it. It foreshortens everything and it makes it hard to judge. But I think, sort of looking at the pace, I think he would have made the corner, and I think a little bit, like, sometimes people kind of get upset, and I'm not saying this is the case here, I'm just saying it in general because it happens a lot in sim racing as well. Like, people get upset when people like go for late moves. It's like, oh, that was too late. It's like, but was it? Because I got alongside and I made the corner.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think if you make the corner, then all fair, isn't it?
Yeah. Whereas you have the opposite thing of when people go for like a late lunge and they don't get enough alongside people. That's a problem. That's the sort of stuff that needs. Oh well, I went for the space that was there. It's like, yeah, but the space was always going to close. Whereas I think Fraser put himself in that space before it had closed.
Yeah, I guess to me the question is to whether it's a penalty or not is Fraser. So Fraser made the apex without contact. Would he have made the apex, and would he have fallen off the track if there's no carts there? If he just breaks there and like almost pretend there's no carts there and just does that as if it's his racing line, does he make the apex? Which it looks like he did. I don't know if that was due to the contact or not. And will he then go off the track, or is he staying on the track? If he's staying on the track, then I don't think you can give a penalty. But I will also say that in this decision they gave him a penalty. I completely understand it from a marshal perspective, like, and I'm still, like I said, I'm still torn 50-50 with the use of footage of the live stream. So, like, I think you're in almost an impossible situation to be in as a marshal adjudicating that, because first of all, you see it once.
Yeah,
and like I said, as it being given as a penalty, I can see why. Like, I can completely see why.
Yeah, and I can imagine it becomes exceptionally hard in that moment to not have the result of the contact influence your decision on the actual move.
Decision.
Because you shouldn't, like, everything about that sort of thing should be that, well, if you've you're adjudicating the incident, you're not adjudicating the outcome of it. That's completely separate. But when you see someone fall from leading the race effectively to in the 20s, like, obviously not immediately after the corner, but like, I mean, I think Andrew still dropped back to like outside the top 10 through like the next corner or two. Like that can be, I imagine, really difficult not to influence your thought process for whether you call it or not.
Yeah. The other thing I will say is that, I'm assuming you haven't seen, I definitely haven't seen, but Andrew William, also shout out to his karting videos, and shout out to Blair, who also gave some good feedback about the podcast. He's released video detailing his sprint round at Wilton, which Yusuf bin Sahel is commentating over and has done it. We will be doing for the entire season.
I watched that this morning.
And so oh, did you? Okay, so you've seen Andrew's footage of the corner.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that. I'm curious.
No, if it was the sort of thing where I was a race steward and I was allowed to use race footage, that footage would have been of no consequence because it's fixed and it's too far forward on the cart to show anything.
Yeah,
and I sometimes think that when you have a GoPro that is a fixed GoPro and not a 360 camera, like I'm lucky enough to be able to use, the context becomes very difficult because you're only seeing stuff from forward of the camera.
Which makes complete sense.
And because of where the cameras are mounted so far forward on the go-kart, any side-to-side contact will look like it's to the detriment of the person with the camera.
Yeah.
Which isn't always the case. So that's one of the biggest things I've found from having my 360 camera of when I'm going through and editing the videos to then put up, is there'll be a situation where I've been like, oh, I really feel like I've been done dirty there. And then I actually watch the footage back, and I'm like, you know what? Actually, no, that's just racing.
Yeah, I really want to invest in a 360 camera at one point for that exact reason. And also something I would say is that, like, I think, again, regardless of if it's a penalty or not, like, there's clearly like a chance to make a move there. So it's not like, I wouldn't say that's over the aggressive driving or, you know, dirty driving, as some people might say. Like, that is just there was a chance there. Fraser's taken it, hasn't come off, and like some people might say, I'm still unsure whether I call it a penalty or not, so I'm completely on the fence here. But whether you give it as a penalty or not, there was a move there, so it was still he's just racing hard, and as you would when you're fighting for a championship.
Yeah, at the end of that very lengthy conversation, we're still firmly on the fence, basically, as an average. Basically. So there we go. And then the last two things I was going to sort of talk about from watching the lightweights, and specifically the A final, is that I thought there were some really good showings from the C2s, placed really highly on the
James
grid.
Whittaker. There was somebody else, I can't remember who was really high up.
Flashman, I think the surname. I can't remember.
Oliver Flashman. So
Oliver Flashman.
He is a BUKC driver for Reading A and is rapid. I was surprised that he was a C2. He has won many VUKC races in the mains and the Premier class. Similar probably to my win count. I was surprised that he was a C2, and I'm pretty sure he's racing the sprints before a few years back. Great drive, and he was rapid, but I fully expected him to be. Again, I was surprised he was putting him down as a C2.
There you go. You've heard it here first. Adam Nather says that Oliver Flashman is just trophy hunting. There you go.
The one who was accused of trophy hunting when I did C2.
But yeah, so I thought, you know what, fair play, because it wasn't like there were no C1s in lightweights at Wilton. So I think that's a good indicator as to the fact they've got some good C2s racing. And the last thing, again from the A final, was, I think, not necessarily a conversation that we'll have today, because I've had an idea that we might talk about this in a future episode, but like racing room and racecraft and stuff like that. There was a moment on either, I think it was maybe the penultimate lap or with 3 laps to go maybe, where there was just an almighty like cluster at the last corner, where people have just completely lost their heads and they've tried going into that chicane like 2 and 3 wide.
Yeah, and then you can look at the exit, and they're all almost on the wall on exit.
Like you got someone facing the wrong way. You've got people. I think even Andrew McWilliam got caught up in it, which is why like it was interesting to see his perspective going through there. But yeah, you got people facing the wrong way. You got people climbing over each other. People next to the wall where no one's near that anymore. Because I mean, like we talked about it in the last one. Say what you want about the last corner, people don't go wide there anymore. Like it was just. It was a moment of complete nonsensical, boneheaded racing. So we can talk about racecraft and racing room and stuff in a future podcast. But yeah, that was it was interesting to watch, but I think it possibly detracted a little bit from the race as a whole. When you see something like that, you think like, what the hell's going on there? But
yeah. Some people ask if racecraft is actually a thing or actually a skill, or if it's just something that people talk about, or like older drivers talk about. And I would kindly direct anybody who makes that claim to that moment or that shot of the exit of the chicane on, was it the penultimate lap, to just show that yes, racecraft is a thing.
Yeah,
and when head goes out the window, this is what happened.
Yeah, and like I say, without going too much into it and having the conversation now, like if you're someone that doesn't believe racecraft is a thing or is still on show, ask yourself why it always seems to be the same people that are up there leading races. Right, next topic. You said you wanted to talk about the new impact data recorder, which is nothing to do with Club 100 now, because it might be in the future. Who knows? But
I didn't think this was the one that you were going to bring up first.
No. So. The impact data recorder, and there's been various people doing videos on this. It's definitely more to do with owner driver racing and that end of the scale, but it doesn't mean that it wouldn't be used in something like Club 100. And I want to do a shout out now to a really, really good karting channel, and it looks at it both from a driving perspective, but also from an officiating perspective, which is Oakman on Racing, who's I believe he's Canadian. And he's got a really good like perspective and does really, really good videos. So yeah, go and have a look at Oakman on Racing for some karting content if you haven't been watching him already, because he's brilliant. But he did a video that I've used to try and get my head around this impact data recorder. So for anyone that doesn't know, the FIA have introduced a new impact data recorder similar to kind of like a black box that you might get on a plane, or other versions of it that you might see on other racing series. But it's only wee. It's about 6 centimeters, I think it is, 12 grams, minus the actual mount that puts it on the car itself. And it was used for the first time in the Karting Academy Trophy, which is in Portugal, so a top level FIA event. Amongst other things, which we don't necessarily know every single one of these things, but it's mainly there to measure G-force in the event of collisions or crashes. And the main reason that the FIA are starting to look at putting them on go-karts is because they want to sort of have a bit more research into the severity, the nature, and the frequency of crashes that are happening within karting. They've got all of these sensors and ability to look at it in other forms of motorsport, but they don't really have anything similar in karting, so they've got that now. And yes, it would be good for many things, but the main reason they want to do it is to have a look at how they can change their regulations that govern the implementation and also therefore the development of safety infrastructure. I can speak, I promise. Around karting and what that looks like. Partly the reason why a lot of new build racing circuits now, you've got all the lovely concrete runoff that everybody loves. Insert sarcasm stamp. But you can't say it doesn't make venues safer.
Safer.
So And then the big thing that people are talking about these, again, not a issue for Club 100 stuff, but people are then thinking, will this replace your drop down or like your pushback nose cones that have been prevalent for so long?
And slightly controversial, I think. I'm not in the owner scene, but I do hear people complaining about the drop down nose cone system.
Yeah, again, for people that don't know, in owner driver racing across the world of karting, there are certain series that I know don't govern them as heavily, but they still are implemented on the karts. But there's it's a mechanical function of the nose cones where under a certain amount of load, it will cause them to drop or be pushed back in their mounts. And if you are seen at the end of a race, or possibly even during a race as well, if it's really obvious, I think it's normally a 5-second penalty that you get dished out at the end of a race if your nose cone has been displaced from where it should be, with the idea that that's meant to limit loading on race starts, to limit people encouraging their competitors wide at corners, to allow them to slip underneath and gain positions in ways that may be morally dubious. So if you are an owner racing driver, you can leave comments underneath as to whether you think drop down pushback nose cones are effective. But what are your thoughts in general to do with this kind of thing?
I mean, I'm an engineer by trade, or engineering student by trade, I should say. So anything that gives you a bit more data, I think is really useful. And actually, I saw something similar quite recently, just in a different sport. So, as part of kind of an engineering degree, you typically do a dissertation, and at the end of the academic year, you all there's a few of you that kind of essentially justify your presentation to a load of academics and other students. And one of the ones I sat in during my own was somebody who had tested out a very similar sensor for squash. Now I don't play squash, so this is I might get some of the jargon wrong, but essentially there's something called a tin, I believe it's called, which is essentially the bottom line. Which if the ball hits, I think if the ball hits, it's considered out of play, and that's currently judged by eye. This person had introduced a sensor into the tin, and essentially which was a frequency sensor and would then spike whenever it would hit the tin and kind of get rid of any other noise on the court, such as like the ball hitting the walls. And he had found it was pretty useful in actually being able to adjudicate this and use this as a form of refereeing, give you an objective answer as to whether the ball has hit the tin or not and will be considered out. And so I think, although I don't think as it is right now, from a adjudicating point of view, it could be used to detect incidents in go-kart circuits, as it's so difficult to kind of, when you're hitting into people or if there's been contact, to discern fault. Maybe you can discern whether contact has been made, but from a health and safety perspective, I think it could be quite useful, as in like if you see like a load of high impact or high load crashes occurring at certain frequencies, or maybe going over certain curbs, you can then potentially use that as a reference point for when you redesign, and you could maybe you might see that at a certain frequency or a certain margin, and that the sensor's picking up, that you get more high risk or serious injury crashes. So I think from a health and safety point of view, it could actually be quite useful. Maybe not the most beneficial, and it might take a lot of time and gathering quite a lot of data to be able to get something from it. But I think it has its potential. From a marshalling point of view, I think there's less potential there, but you could maybe use it, but I don't know how. I don't know the best way to implement it, but I think there is a solution somewhere in there. But you'd have to get copious amounts of data, and I don't know how you pick up that data other than just going through races. But you want it in a controlled manner where you can almost have two carts going into each other in a way that you would consider them fair, versus a bit of contact, but you assume that it's a fair move. And I don't know how you control that in a tested environment.
No, I think that's the biggest thing, and I think possibly the biggest misconception with this device is that it's being that it has the potential of replacing something like a drop-down nose. So like you've already said, it wouldn't be able to distinguish between legal, illegal, intentional, unintentional forms of contact. And that's not to say that unintentional contact isn't illegal. In theory, any form of contact in motor racing is technically illegal, but that's why it has to be interpreted and viewed by a human being as to whether or not a advantage has been gained by one competitor over another. So because of the way that it's designed, it can't do that. So already you can probably say that it's not a suitable replacement for something like a drop-down nose. But you can then argue that if you look at a lot of the development of nose cones now, the bodywork that's being designed by the various bodywork manufacturers is arguably designed in such a way to spread the load to limit the amount of nose cones being activated. Because who wants to go out and buy a new go-kart for God knows how many thousands of pounds? Because newsflash, they're not cheap. And the design of the bumpers on it, or the nose cone on it, is constantly going to cause it to be activated. No one wants that. So the manufacturers are absolutely going to try and do stuff that intentionally tries to circumvent the risk of a nose being dropped or pushed back, whether that's through the density of the plastic being used to make it softer and therefore able to absorb more impact, or even the actual structural design to direct the force in a different direction to the direction of force that would cause it to have to be activated. And I think like one of the main things you can actually see is that the whole, and this isn't secret, this is easily accessible, is you look at the way that it's tested for a drop-down nose, and it's tested against a flat wall. Well, the back of go-karts aren't flat walls, they're contoured and curved and different materials themselves. So it's not necessarily difficult to try and design something that can avoid activation. And then to build on what you said in terms of how could it be used by race stewards or race control in trying to adjudicate something, well, at a race weekend you've got many races going on, and only a limited supply of people. So yeah, you might have a magnetic wand that can go around and scan them and try and source the data that way, but that would only be very small amounts of data probably, and limited. But that would then still need to be analysed by somebody to work out whether or not something illegal has taken place. If it's not as quickly accessible there, then you're starting to think about cables, and it's like, well, who's got the time at the end of a race to go into 30 go-karts and plug in a cable to every single one of them to retrieve data? Well, you don't, because by the time you've done that, 2 more races have been and gone, without the benefit of an official that's now having to do that, so that wouldn't work. So I think it's in this case, it's yes, in the future and the development of this device, it may well be something that can be used to help adjudicate incidents on the go-kart circuit, but for the moment we have to take it as what it is, and what the FIA are saying it is, which is a tool to increase safety of the karts themselves potentially and the venues. Like you look at the last corner at Wilton Mill, for example, with owner-driver racing, and you've got people absolutely launching those curbs to the point now where you can go and have a look at the actual track surface, and it's got gouges out of it from where karts have been bottoming out. There's got to be an argument that that's not good for head, neck, and spine. So that could be where this device goes into karts there. It's analysed by the powers that be, and they go, no, you know what? The design of this curb is causing people to be at greater risk of head, neck, and spine injuries because of the force at which they're landing on the ground afterwards.
Yeah, and like all of these, like you might hear the argument where they say, well, you know, we've been racing on these for years and we're fine. But actually, it's not the short-term consequences of these. It's kind of long-term. It's kind of similar. Again, I'm no expert in this, but with like all the research into concussion injuries, particularly in like American football or rugby, it's maybe it's not something that you notice straight away, but years on later on in life, when it's too late, you then see the long-lasting effects. And so, its use as a tool, as a safety device for testing and maybe gathering that data, would be something that is really, really useful and beneficial, even if you don't think it is, and even if you think it's, I don't know, health and safety gone mad. Actually, its benefits are ones which might actually would be invisible, because actually, let's say some corners are redesigned, and the long-term health, like there's a load of long-term health benefits, so that you don't end up injured or with some long-term back or spinal condition. You have seen the benefit of that is actually nothing happening to you, and so you would then say, oh well, this has clearly done nothing.
You might have to go looking for how this device has impacted your sport, which is a good thing, because if it does its job right, you won't necessarily notice the change in the barrier protection. You won't necessarily notice the slight reprofiling of some curbs necessarily, or you might just think, oh well, that track's, they've redeveloped that part of the circuit because they wanted to change that part of the circuit or whatever, but it's actually been down to this device. And yeah, it's the whole not cliche, but the whole kind of like the nobility of man is planting trees that they know they'll never see the shade of. So yeah, I think it's a good thing. It's just making sure that it's understood what its purpose is, and its purpose is for safety, not necessarily proving that you got punted. So
yeah, exactly that. And hopefully people keep that in mind. But it's so easy to figure out a clickbait article that the skewers are getting replaced with this new sensor, and it's easy to kind of fearmonger people, or like it's easy to get people riled up, basically. But yeah, as long as we keep in the main intention of this, it could be used for some real good.
Yeah. Talking of changes, I've got a question for you, Adam.
Right ahead.
What changes could there be next for Club 100 carts? There's been some changes, but this year. But what other changes could you see happening? I will preface this with a massive disclaimer that neither of us are Club 100 insiders. We're just people that pay them money to enjoy their services. Yes. But it's fun to speculate.
We know no insider information, and this is all speculation. I think this is a tough one. I mean, me personally, since the lack of restriction has been received very well, I don't actually know if the restrictions being taken out completely. I've not driven a junior Rotax, so I don't know. But if there's still some restriction in the carts, if this has been taken out so well, would they possibly make them even less restricted if that is actually feasible? That's the first thing that popped up to mind. And the other thing I guess I would say was that I think they've started trialing lower pressures and circuits than they typically are using. And I have heard that from other kart mechanics that these are the pressures that they're lowering them to are still considered quite high compared to what you might usually run on a kart on these tyres on a track day or on a test day or a race day. So maybe, again, if the lower tyre pressures are being received well, which I think the changes that have been made to the karts this year have been received well, maybe they'll continue to keep going in that direction to hopefully find like an even better sweet spot. And hopefully it might end up helping with parity issues, because I think that's been the main benefit from doing over those things this year, is that I personally think from the first 3 rounds the parity's been a lot better than what it was a year ago. Not to say it wasn't bad, was really bad a year ago. The parity was still pretty good, and as far as arrive and drive goes, it's probably the best parity you'll see. But again, as we've talked about in our own race days, they're still rockets, they're still dud carts, which are very hard to get rid of. But I think we're heading in the right direction, or it feels like it to me. I've only been doing Club 100 from a short term compared to some of the other drivers, especially the sprints. So other people may hold a different view, or other people might have said, "Oh, at one point we had really the closest carts ever." I don't know, but from the general gatherings I've seen, I think it seems to be heading in the right direction anyway.
Well, I enjoyed your expert use of modal verbs there to put yourself firmly on the fence as to whether or not the realms of possibility is high or low. So I've got a few different. I've got five. I've got five things. That's four. Five.
Are you going to be controversial then? Is this
No,
what you're leading into?
Not necessarily, but I've got five things that immediately came to mind with, in my head, vastly different levels of possibility. I want to see if you can put a number value, a classic number value of 1 to 10. 1 being that it will never happen, 10 being that it's going to happen tomorrow.
Okay, go on.
As to what you think. So, my first one, I think we can both agree that the bodywork of a Club 100 kart is very effective, but not necessarily the most attractive. Yeah. So, so my thinking there is that whilst effective, and that's very important, it would be nice to have some very pretty looking racing machines going around the circuit, and then that would be nice for photos and possibly even better for the bottom line of Club 100. So where would you stand, do you think, on a level of 1 to 10 of the bodywork being redesigned at some point?
Define redesign. Are the bumpers actually changing in their profile, or is it like the stickers or the color scheme is changing?
Why not both? Probably not the color scheme, but I can imagine possibly the actual profile, making them possibly look a little bit more streamlined, but hopefully still with the same levels of safety and resilience, because you don't want to have them having to replace side pods every other race, and then that cost gets passed on to the patrons. But at the same time, see if they can be made slightly more attractive.
If 10 is the most likely, I would say probably on a 4, because I imagine the viewpoint is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I agree. I think it'd be a pretty cool thing to implement. And the reason I've not said it's completely unlikely is because these chassis are currently 2 years old, I guess, or they're in their second year of service. I think Club 100 typically replace their chassis every 3 years, and so maybe next year they would end up having the conversation of, we get new chassis, maybe we should have a look at the bodywork. Let's see if we can make them look a bit cooler, make them look a bit more racy. So I could see that conversation maybe happening next year, but I don't think it's something that is high on their priority list, I'd say.
No, I agree. I think it's not high on the priority, absolutely not. What I would really like to see is, I've got a real soft spot for like the late 90s, early 2000s karting bodywork. There's just something about it that I think looks really awesome. Cool. Now, obviously, like your old school, just cuboid side pods, super fragile, like really thin, not up to anything at all. Like, but one thing I do really like, and the fact that the fact that Club 100 run Birrell chassis makes it potentially possible. I'm not sure if I liked it at the time, but I look back at it now and I like it more and more. Was like the really old school NASA panel that Birrell used to run, that was kind of like the double curve, that was so different.
I like that.
Our current nose cone looks a little bit like that, but I love how it kind of like, I look back at that now and I love how it like bleeds into and is like part of the front nose cone. I think the side pods look really cool, and I think like you can see elements of that in the current side pod design that the Club 100s have, but I think that just looks cool.
I think that looks very cool. I would love a side pod redesign, and I think if you can make them look a bit more aggressive, a bit more racy. I think the karts do look a bit boxy. I guess they kind of are by design. They have to be, just due to the fact that they are arrive and drive rental karts, and they don't want massive amount of damages to them. But this looks a bit more like a mini kind of open seater car, which is what I think is what you'd want at the peak.
Yeah.
The peak kart design to look like.
I'll put this one up in a minute as well, but like I think like absolute. This is a Tony kart that's going to be on the screen, but
that's
like
okay.
it's much that I think is absolute peak go kart. Like,
that
design.
Agree. I think that looks amazing.
It's just cool.
If the cars look like that, that'd be awesome.
But yeah, so I think like if there could be some influence, a bit more influence, even if it was just the NASA panel and nose cone, that like they were slightly reformed to resemble that Birrell of times gone by, because obviously none of them look like that anymore. They've got these very much more aerodynamically influenced nose cones, but something like that I think would just be awesome. And I want to be optimistic and put it as a 6.
I wish you're right. I would love it to be I'd love it to be a 10. I'd love for them to do it right now. I'd love for I think the bodywork could be redesigned to look a lot more racing, a lot more visually appealing, while still keeping like a lot of structural integrity. But yeah, let's hope you're right. Let's hope it is a 6, and let's hope maybe next year that's what they're going to look to do.
Right, number 2, senior Rotax engines.
I'd love for that to happen. I would be so on board, but I'd put that at a 1. I don't think they're going to run the seniors. There's no way it's going to happen. They'd have to implement the massive rad on that chassis as well.
No,
yeah,
I mean the senior rad is the same size as the rad we got now.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
I saw I'm thinking of like the.
You're thinking of the X30s.
Oh, the X30s then. That'll be it.
So the difference between the senior engine and the one that we currently run is that there's the addition of a power valve on the back of the engine.
Okay.
Because I think we now run just the junior restrictor, which is essentially just an open exhaust manifold. I could be wrong, but from what I remember going from when I used to do Rotax back in the day, many moons ago, the difference between going from a Minimax to a Junior was that you had a restricted exhaust manifold to then a completely open one, and then going from a Junior to a Senior was you had the same exhaust manifold, but then you had a power valve added to the back of the engine as well, which under a certain amount of pressure then opened a slot valve, or no, it wouldn't be a reed valve, just like a slide.
I do hope we get some sort of power increase at some point somehow, whatever way. Like, yeah. I wish the cars were slightly quicker than they are. But going to a full senior setup to me just seems it's not going to happen. As much as I'd love it, and I think a few drivers in the championship would love it, I don't think that's the audience.
No.
Club 100. I think if the field bunches up massively, and you get it gets to the point where it's harder to extract a lot from the carts, I think that would end up being a point where they might look to say, okay, we still need a skill gap, because I think part of the appeal of Club 100 is that there is a tree to climb, and there's that perceived view of like, as a driver, you can make a huge difference in terms of lap time. So I think if the field bunched up really close, which I think is kind of currently happening, you could see them maybe look to say, okay, can we make things more powerful? Can we make it so that there's a bit more involvement from the driver in order to extract more lap time? But yeah, a senior setup, I'd have to sadly say it's a 1.
Yeah, no, I can't see that one happening particularly soon either, if at all. I mean, again, I'm apparently more of an optimist than you. I'd want to put it like a 2. So like it's a not.
I was
never,
tempted to say 2.
It's not a never going to happen, but like you look at it from a business standpoint, it's extra cost, extra points of failure to then have to potentially replace, an extra point of possible disparity. So that's a lot of cost that end up getting passed on to customers, which isn't ideal. And I think it's important to remember, like, speed. I think having a progression of speed is important. I've spoken to Joe about this in the paddock before, where he was saying that previously there'd been no real like incentive for juniors to go up in the seniors because they actually end up going slower. Whereas now, from what I understand, the juniors run the mini restrictor, and then the seniors have the open manifold. So there is actually, I think, a speed difference now. I could be wrong, but I think that's what I've heard. And so like you said, having that kind of ladder to have to climb, I think is important. But I think that speed isn't everything, and trying to remind people of that can sometimes be difficult, in that you actually, if you watch a lot of motor racing series, often the best racing comes from the karts that are, or not karts, or just the vehicles that are lower on power. And if you want to race, then having more power tends to separate drivers more, and then you get less racing.
I'm curious to see if that is the case, the lap time difference between the juniors and the seniors at the moment, just because we are heavier. I wonder if that has made a difference to the way we are quicker at tracks. And if not, then maybe that is an incentive for them to look at how they can still modify the senior kart so that it does feel like a genuine jump up. Which I think, yeah, like similar to what you and Joe talks about, I think that is really important. I think there should be a ladder. I think there should be an incentive for the senior carts to be quicker. And I think even from the perspective of the seniors, they want to know that they're driving maybe the most difficult or the quickest or the best performing carts that they can, and not the juniors. I think a lot of the seniors would want that distinction as well. So it works both ways.
Yeah. Of course, though, before we move on to the next one, they do get to come up into seniors and race such drivers as yourself, which is obviously much more difficult anyway. So, there you go.
Thank you. I would take the compliment.
There you go. I feel like this one's going to be quite a quick verdict and moving on. But I was thinking along the engine lines and going from like a junior engine to a senior engine, different engine manufacturer, because they have done it before. They've gone from TKM to Rotax. Could you see them moving away from Rotax anytime soon?
No, they've got such a good deal with the Rotax, with Rotax Evo. With these Evo engines, I don't see that partnership being broken for a long time. I will put it as a 3 though, only because that it could be a long and successful partnership, but at some point that may dissolve due to whatever external factors. In the same way, I don't, the TKM era. Which I really wish I got to drive those carts because people were saying I had to drive. But that was a successful partnership. It was just a good time for both parties to kind of split, and so that might end up happening in the future for Rotax and Club 100.
Yeah.
So I'd get 3, but I think that would have to be very long term. I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
I think you'd probably find it mirrors a little bit like the TKM did to. You might not necessarily know this, not being from like owner-driver era that I was from as well, but when I first started karting, TKM was huge, massive participation in TKM. And not to say that Rotax had just started when I was racing, but TKM's outnumbered Rotax drivers considerably. Then over the course of a few seasons, you saw TKM participation start dropping and become more comparable, and then Rotax overtook it, and then it just kept going and going, and Rotax became the class. To the point now where there's very, very few TKM drivers. TKM now is, without wanting to paint it with a massive broad brush, TKM now seems to be a class that a lot of people who are either very new to karting or possibly karting on quite a strict budget look to enter. And I think with Iami's X30, there was the potential of something similar happening with Rotax and the Iami engines and X30s. And on a European level, Iami is everything, really. Obviously, you don't obviously get Rotax European races and Worlds, but you do. You get obviously the Rotax Grand Finals and the prevalence, but there's a lot more drivers in Europe that use Iami engines, or engines that aren't Rotax. Same in America, a lot more engines that aren't Rotax engines. But it would be interesting to see there if Rotax started declining, similar to how TKM declined when Rotax became the number one engine represented in club racing. Could something similar happen there, where Rotax starts declining to the point where it becomes a much less featured class, which then means that maybe not immediately, but over the course of time, Club 100 have to mirror that and move away from the Rotax, a bit like they moved away from the TKM, because it just wasn't maybe as viable in the sphere of karting as it was at the time. But yeah, maybe a 3.
Yeah, I think 3 makes sense. And history could repeat itself. You never know. So I wouldn't say it's completely out of the question. Just not right now.
No. Rear numbers.
Ooh.
Rear number plate, so you know exactly who it is that's punted you off as you look up at they drive away.
I'd love for that to be a thing. I just due to the current side pod and bumper setup, I just don't see it happening though. I'd say I think I'd actually also give it a 3 because I don't know. Again, if the bumpers kind of the slide pods got redesigned, maybe you could see it becoming a thing. But I just don't see the incentive to do it from Club 100's perspective. If anything, it might make people slightly more aggressive to certain drivers if they notice a number or something,
or possibly even less so if they know that it's
Or
going to
maybe
be
less so.
easier for spotters to definitely identify who did what.
I never thought about that actually. I didn't consider that point. I guess it could make it easier for spotters to be able to pick out who's who, which does tend to be an issue at points, especially when you've got like 4 or 5 carts in a train, or as you saw in the lightweight A final. I don't even know what you'd do when looking through those people in the chicane. Like, what do you even adjudicate? Everybody is just everywhere. But yeah, I guess it has that benefit, but also it's an extra. If you think about how tight a schedule Club 100 run, they want to make sure everybody is in their carts, have got number plates in, transponders on, and just ready. And as soon as one race ends for a sprint round, the next one goes out. They like things run really efficiently. Having another thing that you have to put on the back of the cart, I'm assuming it'd be a second number plate. Would then also add something that you need to do when setting up your cart, and so it would be less time efficient. And it could cause slight delays, which I'm sure is something that they're really heavily against. So I think that would kind of put them off it. I would say, just due to the fact that I said of the kind of due to the engine manufacturer score I gave, I think would also give it a 3. I don't really see it being too likely because I just don't think there's enough of an incentive to do it. But it's again not completely out of the question.
No, I think that it would. It's a real cost benefit point in that the cost of the extra number plates and the extra number stickers and the extra mounting point to a car and the additional split clips pins to affix, if that's the way that they were going to go, rather than maybe like a little miniature one that gets put somewhere, whatever. No, chalkboard. Like there is the potential of like a lot of little cost to add up to an extra one, and is it worth it? It definitely would make adjudicating easier. It potentially would make people more conscious of how they're driving if they know they're going to be much more identifiable. But yeah, is the cost less than the benefit? Probably not at the moment. So yeah, it's going to be below 5. I don't think it's impossible. I don't think it's super unlikely. So I'd probably go 3 or 4. But yeah, it's definitely less likely than more likely. And my last one was one that is a personal peeve of mine: the fact that we don't have any angled steering bosses. And now I don't know if you've ever driven a kart with an angled steering boss, but it makes it feel like you're driving a go-kart and not a bus.
Does the angled steering bosses to make the wheel more flat?
Yeah, more upright. Yeah, so
more upright,
yeah. So we just have straight steering bosses where it's at 90 degrees to the steering column, which in a go-kart makes the wheel quite flat, relatively speaking. Whereas an angled steering boss takes it from being like that to more like that, which is what you'd get on pretty much all owner-driver karts. They all have, not necessarily by default, but I imagine they probably do now, an angled steering boss. So yeah, just that's a peeve of mine. Having driven for so long, being able to sort of have the wheel in one situation to then have it much flatter, it was quite jarring to start off with. But if you've never known anything different, then it's maybe not as much of an issue in your mind.
The thing I was thinking of though is that if you used an angled boss, and I wonder if this is part of the reason why it's kind of used in Rotax, is because the tires are so grippy, you don't need to put as much steering input in. And I think if that steering wheel, I could be wrong because I've not driven them, but if with an angled boss, it is harder to put on more steering lock, or it is, you'd have to put more work into doing it, and so you're less likely to do it. Whereas in Club 100, actually, you do want the ability to quite easily put in a lot of steering lock, especially in the wet. So do you think is that potentially the reason why we don't use an angle steering bus, and is that a potential issue? I don't. Yeah, just from a curiosity perspective.
I think there's two reasons why we don't. I think the first reason is cost. I imagine that they're potentially slightly more expensive, and if they don't come with the carts by default, it's an expense that you don't necessarily have to use. I also think that it's potentially a consideration because of the higher likelihood of damage to steering wheels in the event of a crash. So if you imagine at the moment, with the fact that the angle to the ground of the steering wheels is more acute, more of that force gets pushed towards the top in the direction of travel of the steering wheel. Whereas if you were to have the steering wheel more upright and there was to be a front-on collision, you're now pushing the steering wheel into the column more so, which potentially risks bending of the wheel, bending of the column, or bending of the track rods more. So potentially it's a design choice with the intention of it's less likely to cause damage to components. I don't know how much truth there is at that, but just kind of like a quick logical progression as to if you were to be in a collision with the force going forwards, how does that then impact the steering geometry?
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, just when I was asking from a drivability perspective, do you see that? I was just curious. Do you think that is the case when it comes to like putting on steering lock, just due to it being slightly more angled up? Is it more difficult to kind of crank it all the way around?
I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
I mean, I raced for like the best part of, God, how long would it be? Like 10 or so years, 13 years, with a more upright steering wheel, and you get used to it. And there's certain aspects of it that I think make it more refined.
Okay. I just wasn't sure. I haven't driven with an angle steering bus, so I can't say. But from what we've said, there's just no incentive for them to do it, really. Or there's not. I don't see there's a big incentive anyway. Maybe you could say the majority of drivers might have that if they come from Monaco. But actually, you've got the opposite, where I think the majority of Club 100 drivers, like myself, have come from other forms of rental karting. I think there's only a few. Well, actually, maybe not a select few. But I think the audience that they cater to for newer drivers tend to be people from rental karting. I would say in the senior sprint championships, there's actually quite a lot that have done owners, and have come from owners, especially in the heavyweights. But maybe from a new uptake, they look at people who've also done rental karting, so they wouldn't have experience of those angle steering bosses, and of the angle bosses. And so I just don't see there being a point for them to implement it. So I would say, I'd say a 1 actually. Again, yeah. I just don't see them ever doing it.
Yeah, I think it's also a 1, and I would love it for it to be like a 9 or a 10. But that's
I'd be curious. I'd want it at like a 7, just because I'm curious to see how different it would feel. Yeah. I'd love to test a car like that.
Yeah. So I think of that we've been highly pessimistic, and we think that none of these are really going to happen. But of all of them, a potential glow up to the bodywork, I think, would be the most interesting. Offers zero benefit to drivability whatsoever. But it would just look really
cool.
Nice. Yeah,
exactly. I would say these are some really creative. And when you'd asked me, I went for what I thought would be the most realistic possible, and you've gone for some really creative ideas there. So I definitely commend you on that.
But yeah, so Club 100, if you could make them look like early 90s to mid 90s go-karts in general, or like that 2000s Birrell, then that would be good for me.
I think the testers would love it too. I know Nicky Richardson, who's one of the kart testers of Club 100. I reckon he'd absolutely love that. I think he always posts like of him karting back in the days, was very successful in owners, especially as a junior and a cadet, I believe.
Yeah.
I think he'd definitely be in massive support of that.
Yeah. So there you go. That's what everybody. Next time you're at a Club 100 event, find Nicky and bug him relentlessly until he says something to JV and it gets done. There you go.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah,
That's the way
play
to
on
do
his
it.
desire for 90s to return. Right, I've only got one last thing on my list of things to talk about. I'm conscious that we've been recording for nearly 2 hours, but we can always cut it down. But
Your editing will take a bit longer.
yeah. Do you still have thoughts on Monaco and Formula One and big racing series such as that?
Yeah, let's say the junior series to our Club 100 things, which obviously take that highlight.
For context, Monaco's just recently happened, and obviously there were various things that happened there. So yeah, what are your thoughts on
various
Monaco?
things that happened? That's news to me. To be fair, I thought it was one of the
Nothing
dullest
happened
races
whatsoever.
I think the biggest talking point around Monaco, and I was always on the other side of the fence with this, and I'm curious to see where you lie on, is should it be a race with the current cars? And I always said yes, because it's the most prestigious race, it's the longest serving on the calendar, I believe. If I could actually be wrong with that, but I assume it is. And also, it's probably the one with the most notoriety. I think pre-Netflix era of Drive to Survive, let's call it that, Netflix era, if you ask people to name one F1 circuit globally, not just in the UK, because they'll probably name something, the one that would come up the most would be Monaco. But now, with how the past few years have gone, especially this year, where the most exciting thing to me that happened was literally a Gasly's car, where the brakes had failed and him going around damaged. I just don't. I think the way the cars are, even with the new 26 regulations on the chassis, they're just not going to be really feasible to race. And so either circuit modifications should be made, or we should just stop racing at Monaco, because we're not racing at Monaco. It's just dull. I think it's the least race friendly circuit on the calendar, and even back in maybe the 90s and the early 2000s, it was still it still wasn't great for racing. And even the drivers seem to find it boring, because nobody's even going at 100%. Everybody's driving like 4 or 5 seconds lap slower than they want to because of strategy. It is the most anti-racing circuit at the moment, and so yeah, I think we should be done with it.
Yeah. I'm of the camp that I think the best part of Monaco is qualifying. So, as a qualifying circuit, I think it's phenomenal, because there is literally no room for error. Like you make one mistake and it's game over, and I think that's awesome. And to see cars going as fast as they do, granted it's the slowest average speed of any circuit on the calendar, but as fast as they can still go around streets like that, it's impressive. So I would be one for having a special qualifying rule set where, rather than the Q3, Q2, Q1, it's one-shot qualifying.
Oh, that would be really good.
So yeah,
I don't see the not ever agreeing to that, but that'd be cool.
It's not a new idea. It's been one that people have suggested a lot for many years, but I think that would be something that would really service Monaco well. In terms of what you were saying about like driving it in different vehicles, never going to happen, because what incentive do the teams have if it doesn't have any pertinence to the overall outcome of the? And I've heard people be like, "Oh, just make it a non-championship event." It's like, okay, well then what's the point of them turning up?
There's no point of going that. I don't think different vehicles. I think if there was anything to do to change Monaco to make it more raceable, circuit modification. I meant more as regulation standpoint of what.
Oh, I see.
The cars
right, sorry.
in 26. Not that they'll take, I don't know, a set stock car which is really thin. I don't like that.
And like people's like, oh, where like you do qualifying and then that's where you get your points from, and then on the Sunday they just do a race in karts and stuff. They get a bunch of super karts. It's like never going to happen. Never in a million years. Yeah. Less than a one from a moment ago. But yeah, I mean, it would be cool. Like, absolutely, it'd be cool, but it's never going to happen. The only way that you're going to get decent racing at Monaco is if the cars are significantly smaller. First of all, because the cars are too big, or you modify the or you modify the circuit.
How do you modify the circuit?
Well, I can come on to that in a minute. Or you have a much, much, much greater disparity between the different compounds of tyre. And that's something that people have brought up in general for Formula One, is there needs to be more disparity between the pace on each tyre. So for those people that don't know, with Formula One, they have various different compounds of tyre that they take to different races, but they'll be labelled as the soft, the medium, and the hard, always. Previously, they were labelled as to what they were, like the ultra soft and the super soft and the soft and stuff. But now it's just soft, medium, hard, but there'll be different compounds. So at Silverstone, your soft might be a C4 tyre or a C3 tyre, whereas at Monaco, your soft might be the C2. And like your C1 is your softest tyre. I think it goes up to C6, which is the hardest tyre. So something that they could do is potentially do one or both. Have it so that there's more than they're not consecutive tyre compounds that go. So rather having the C3, the C4, and the C5. They instead have the C1, the C3, and the C6. Or, the C1, the C3, and the C5. Or the C2, the C4, and the C6, for example. So that way, someone on a soft tyre is, rather than being 2 steps down, they're now 4 steps softer, or 4 steps harder, conversely, so that you've now got a much greater speed disparity between cars and what they can actually do. That would be one way of possibly looking at it. Another way would be to do that and have more tyre compounds. So have more softer or harder, whichever way you want to look at it, so that you can have even greater disparities between each tyre compound, so long as obviously it's not going to become dangerous. I mean, as a tyre manufacturer, I mean, they could, and they've shown that they can design a tyre that could last for 3 Monacos.
Yeah.
And
Monaco's not really a track where there's like massive amount of tyre wear from the looks of it either.
No, so yeah, I think what they would need to do really is have a look at the tyre compounds they take, and have more disparity between them, and make the cars smaller, which in theory next year they are going to be, but not really. I mean,
they're not small enough. That's the issue.
Not small enough, and that's not to say that you make them smaller at the cost of safety, because I understand that it's like you see on road cars now. Road cars now are bigger, but they are also safer. So that kind of goes hand in hand. If you made them too small, they'd end up becoming cars from the 70s and 80s again, which is not a great time because lots of people died in the 60s, 70s, and 80s of Formula One. So let's not do that again. But the other thing, and you may or may not have seen on social media, it's been doing the rounds. Alex Wurz, who is the chairman of the Grand Prix Drivers Association, which George Russell heads, is like the drivers' chair. He made some suggestions that he believed would be beneficial to Monaco, and I can put these up obviously in the edit. But there were 3 things that he said would help Monaco. The first one, I keep forgetting what it's called now, but I always know it as the Lowe's hairpin. The Lowe's hairpin, reprofiling that, so making the entrance wider and the exit wider, so there's more space for people to potentially go for moves going into the hairpin without actually technically changing the radius of the corner. So it'd still be very, very tight, and the teams would probably still have to use their special Monaco steering racks, but there's more space on the entry and more space on the exit to make a move. That would require very little in the way of altering the corner, because the curb is basically pavement where people would normally walk when it's not a Grand Prix weekend. So you'd obviously need to get rid of some of that pavement on the entry into the corner, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't have a painted pavement, so that during normal use it's still clear where people are walking and people are driving, because you don't want people run over, obviously. So
that's pretty sensible, to be honest.
That was his first suggestion. His second suggestion, that requires very little change in terms of modifications to existing infrastructure, is Le Grascasse, the second to last corner at Monaco, if you're not au fait with the corner names, to bring the apex barrier. If you're looking at it top down, and you're looking at it from the perspective of looking towards the corner, the car's coming towards you. The apex barrier curb essentially gets brought out towards our viewing right, driver's left. The entry going into the corner, therefore, is slightly elongated. The radius of the corner decreases slightly, so it now becomes tighter. And the the outside of the track gets pushed to our viewing right, driver's left as well, effectively giving more room between the chicane and the actual apex of the corner. So it's slightly longer, and it's slightly straighter, so it's easier for people to get out the inside. Slightly tighter, so it requires the cars to slow down more, so more opportunity to then make a move. And there's nothing in the way that necessarily needs completely being overhauled by your Monaco council, like the local council in that part of the world to do anything. It would just be like a track change. So that one is reasonably easy to do. And I think his other theory with that is that it would bunch the cars up more, meaning that they're close to each other as they come around the final corner. Anthony Nogues potentially then able to make a move going down the main straight towards Van der Voort, where the Formula One racing games will always tell you not to be a hero. And then the last one, which is the most difficult to implement, that Mr. Wirtz suggested, is a reprofiling of the Nouvelle chicane, which is the one that you come out of the tunnel. So he suggested moving it 80 meters further away from the tunnel, and
so you can make a move into it because you got a bigger overspeed.
Yeah, and reprofiling it so there'd actually have to be some development into the harbour somewhat to create land that doesn't currently exist. Not something that is impossible. I mean, I'm sure the Monaco Council aren't short of money.
No.
But obviously it would then require them to reduce the amount of space that there is currently in the marina, which may be a consideration, and obviously it'd be very expensive building land that doesn't currently exist, even if it is just a small amount of land. That's probably the least likely to happen, but could be the most beneficial in that it turns that corner into more of an overtaking opportunity. The actual size of the chicane, he's shown it as being bigger, so the distance between what would be the left and the right of the chicane is increased. I suppose the theory is that there's more space and more time for someone on the outside to potentially stay on the circuit or allow the overtaking car so they can slot back in behind without just, because at the moment the default at the moment is just basically, if you get overtaken going into the chicane, you just cut the chicane. But there's nothing else. There's nothing else you can really do. So yeah, that was his third suggestion, which he thinks would be beneficial.
I think they're all good. Well, I think they're all honestly pretty good suggestions, but I will also say that I don't think they're extreme enough. I think they make a difference, but I guess the question is, because that gives you potentially 3 overtaking zones, but are they three good overtaking zones? Like, I guess Raskas now is a corner where, at least in the F1 game, you can actually make a move down, and you have seen people go for overtake zone in the past. So trying to reprofile the corner slightly so that it's slightly wider on entry makes it even more feasible. Same with the hairpin, kind of same with the swimming pool. So in theory, it'd be beneficial, but I don't know. I'd have to see exactly how much distance you basically increase for vehicles or for the cars to go side by side to see if it actually would make a big enough impact.
I think one of the things
maybe it would have to be more extreme.
I think one of the things, like sort of building, you're saying, like at Raskas, like you've seen people making moves before. One of the things that Anthony Wirtz said is that it wouldn't necessarily make overtaking significantly easier, but it would make it more likely. And one of the things he said was, for example, people going for overtaking moves through the Raskas, when people have gone for it in the past, sometimes it's worked, sometimes it's caused a crash which has incited a safety car, which also changes the profile of the race. So that was his thinking there, is that yes, it might encourage people to go for it more, which might make more successful overtakes, but if people are going for more moves, it also increases the possibility of overtakes going wrong. which also potentially benefits the racing in some way. So
that is a very good point. Was there any response from anybody?
I haven't looked too much into the response. I think in general people are like they've said that it's feasible, and that there's nothing to suggest that it wouldn't improve. The likelihood of it improving isn't necessarily guaranteed, but I don't think it's been universally dismissed by people. The biggest thing, yeah, the biggest thing of it is cost and desire, because if the organisers of the Monaco race have no desire to change the circuit, then they won't. If the cost of changing the circuit, they don't think they'll get back in ticket sales or tourism, then they won't. So yeah, you're not just playing, and if they think it's going to detrimentally impact day-to-day life in terms of getting rid of pavements and all this kind of stuff, like, then they won't do it either, because they, for the sake of one weekend a year, why would they spend all of that money for something that they don't see the point in?
Yeah, I don't. I think there is incentive for them to want to make improvements to the circuit. I would argue, just due to the fact that, especially now with how prevalent F1 is in social media, like it's becoming more of a well-known thing, even by people that don't watch racing. That yes, Monaco might be the most well-known race, but it's also the most boring, and it's known as, oh, you can't race here. But if it gets that reputation, I think that's at a detriment to the race organisers, as they don't want people to, the public, to all just think, oh yeah, this is a pointless race, a pointless exercise. So I think to avoid that perception, at least showing some initiative like this to try and make the racing better would be a really positive look on them. But that's how I'd see it.
I nearly forgot as well. I wanted to get your opinion on my other way that I would improve Monaco, and I nearly forgot this. Right.
Oh,
so
reverse race.
Reverse race. So I said one-shot qualifying. That's one that's been said by a lot of people. But I had a
unique,
an advancement on one-shot qualifying.
Okay.
Now, previously in Formula One, there was a qualifying format where the drivers would do 2 one-shot laps, and then their aggregate lap time was what set the grid. Wasn't particularly popular, didn't last that long. But at the same weekend, I don't think it's not. I think pretty much it is every year. The Indianapolis 500 goes on at the same time as Monaco, or on the same day, same weekend. Now, if you're not someone that follows the 500 or someone that follows IndyCar, the way that oval qualifying for IndyCar works, and for 500, if that's the only one that you watch, is that a driver's speed over 4 laps is averaged, and the average speed over 4 laps is what sets the grid. Effectively, it's like doing because speed is just distance over time, so it's a bit like having a lap time, but the way they look at it as speed, because an IndyCar is like going 230 miles an hour, which is insane for that period of time. So they do it as like who's got the fastest average speed over 4 laps. So what I was thinking is that Formula One could jump on the back of that a little bit and like have a little bit of influence from the Indy 500 and have a one-shot qualifying at Monaco, but have it over, like, have it as your average lap time over a set number of laps. So you get your warm-up lap, and then rather than just having 1 lap to set the absolute fastest you can, you have to set the absolute fastest you can like 3 laps in a row. And the reason I think that potentially could be interesting around Monaco is that any of the drivers are good enough. Minus Lance Stroll. Any of the drivers are good enough to put in 1 blistering lap. But are they that ballsy to go that flat out for like 3-4 laps in a row?
That's a really good point.
And the way that and then it also becomes like, significant jeopardy, like how would they do it? Would they say that your running order is championship order, reverse championship order? Do you draw a random allocation as to when you go during the course of the day? Because obviously track conditions might change, might get better, might get worse. So yeah, like there's an extra bit of jeopardy that comes into it as well.
I think it's a pretty decent idea. I don't know how it would go in execution. I don't know how popular it would be, but I think it's one of those that it's worth trialing for the sake of trialing. And I think the idea of having to do 3 laps, bear in mind, like in quali, you see people spinning it or like hitting a wall or having to back out of laps or getting wing damage just over trying to do their 1 laps. But yeah, that kind of idea of pushing the 3 laps increases the jeopardy of somebody hitting it or hitting a wall. And so do you then go 100% or do you hold back a bit? So I think that would be a really cool idea. I don't know how much the public will buy into it. I don't know what public perception of the idea would be, but with how Monaco is at the moment, I think it's definitely worth doing. I'll try it.
There you go. You've heard it here first. It's an approved idea, and it will happen.
Yes, 100%. And if it does happen, they got the idea from this podcast.
I mean, I haven't heard anyone else. I'm not saying that anyone else hasn't had this idea. I'm not as arrogant. I'm not as arrogant to suggest that that's the case. But I haven't heard anyone else give this idea. So if it does happen, I want some form of payment. I'm just saying that now. Formula One have got deep pockets.
You know, if they shout out the podcast during an F1 weekend, I'd take that. I'd be
even if it's just a case of and now Monaco Formula One qualifying presented by the Down to Chat podcast. Like
Imagine that. Oh.
There you go. But there you go. There's some thoughts on Formula One and Monaco. Adam, we've been going for approaching 2.5 hours. So
you're gonna love cutting this one down.
Yeah, I feel like we've got quite a lot of content here, and there's probably still many things that we could talk about. I've got an entire list of things that we could continue to talk about, but that will have to be for next time. Thank you very much for watching or listening, whichever way it is that you have had our voices and possibly visages gracing your past couple of hours. It's been good fun, and hopefully you've enjoyed. So until next time, thank you very much. And as always, have a good one. Say bye, Adam.
Bye, guys.